Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED, and this is Q5 Ham Radio. I'm joined tonight by Mark Haynes M0DXR. I just returned from Boston for the WRTC 2026. Mark was the chairman of WRTC 2026, a hugely successful event. Hundreds of people descended upon Boston, spectators, judges, referees, volunteers. And I'm looking forward to catching up with Mark after he's had a week to hopefully get a little bit of rest. This episode is brought to you by DX Engineering, supporting amateur radio operators worldwide with the gear and expertise to get you on the air. Mark, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Kevin. A pleasure as always. Nice to see you. And it was great to see you recently in the UK.
It was definitely worth the trip, and I really appreciate the invitation. So have you come off the cloud yet? I know that everybody was pretty elated with the results. How are you feeling?
Yeah, feeling pretty good, Kevin. I mean, there's always so many unknowns going into an event like WRTC that there's things happening at all angles, as I'm sure you experienced. It was great to see you and your family also came over and got involved, so that was tremendous to see. Yeah, quite a lot of emotions actually. I mean, that closing ceremony was really emotional. You probably saw me choking up a little bit during that because I think it was just after so much hard work that all of the team put in, just to see everything come together in the end was just completely overwhelming, to be honest. And all of the operators seemed to have a really good time, and the weather was really good, and that's a really important aspect when you've got so many people out in the field, and you just hope that the thunderstorms stay away, the rain and the high winds. We had extremely good weather, and actually on the week leading up to the contest, it was very hot indeed. We had kind of 34, 35 degrees. Talking in Celsius, of course, apologies. But during the actual contest, it came down somewhat and sort of dropped to the high 20s, sort of 26, 27 degrees, which was pretty much perfect, to be honest. And there was a nice breeze coming through the tents for the operators. So, yeah, I think, and the propagation, I mean, I was just astounded by the number of QSOs that the teams managed to put in the log. And with the conditions at the beginning of the contest, we had a K index of around about 2, something like that, which is pretty good. And then it came up to kind of 4, which you'd expect pretty dire conditions with a K index of 4. But interestingly, it didn't really seem to affect the guys that much, and they were still banging in those QSOs. So, yeah, all in all, I think we were really pleased with how that all turned out. And I mean, the site build. The volunteers did an absolutely superb job. I couldn't have asked any more of the site teams in terms of the station building, and the site managers were there and helping the teams through the contest. So yeah, I mean, couldn't really have asked for much more. The media team back at headquarters, including yourself, that was all extremely successful with the daily WRTC Today broadcast that went out. That was just superb. So yeah, what more could I have asked for? Really, not anything at all.
Well, there's so many different directions I want to take this in and so much ground I want to cover. I do want to say this. I've been involved with some pretty big events in the past, but none that I've worked on over 3 years. So I really can't imagine what that's like to work on a project over a 3-year period. So we're going to get into that in a second. But Mark, I want to work backwards a little bit. I don't want to assume that everybody watching knows what the WRTC is. So would you just give us a quick primer for those that aren't aware of WRTC 2026? What is it all about?
It all started in 1990, the World Radiosport Team Championship. And this WRTC thing is really about getting the best operators, the best contest operators globally to come together into one place. In ham radio contesting, there's so many variables, including your geographic location, the type of antennas that you use, and whether you're perched on a hilltop or in a valley. You know, all these variables exist in contesting. What WRTC does is tries to bring the top contesters into one place to eliminate as many of those variables as possible, so that we can actually give the operators equal conditions to see who the best really are. And it all really comes down to operator strategy and the working together between these two operators that make up a team. And really those with the best strategy, the best overall assessment of the conditions they're presented with, how they deal with that, they come out on top. So WRTC takes place once every 4 years, generally, much like the Olympic Games, and the host nation of WRTC will change each time. So there's a bidding process for an organising committee that put that to a sanctioning committee. The sanctioning committee oversee it. They award the hosting rights to a new organising committee each time. So we started our journey as the UK organisers about 3.5 years ago, and we've been working to through a qualification process for people to reach WRTC over a period of about 2 years. And of course, it's our job then to put on the show to find, in this case, 50 operating sites for the teams to come and take part in a contest. It actually takes place in the IARU HF Championship contest, which is the second full weekend of July. So we've just hosted that here in the United Kingdom. And now that we've completed that, it's I guess there's an organising committee that's hoping to do that again in 4 years' time. So that's really what WRTC is, and it's on. In addition to it being a competition, it's a fantastic opportunity for radio contesters to get together and also spectators to come and watch the event. And it's a big social event, and hopefully that was the case this time as well.
Mark, one of the things that struck me, being able to sit with people in person, such as Rusty W6OAT, I had known that the WRTC had evolved over all these years, but I guess I hadn't realized how much it had evolved. So I'm curious, did the WRTC evolve much from Italy?
It changes each time in a number of ways, I guess. I suppose there were a few things that we really wanted to we used what Italy achieved. I mean, they did tremendous things, and we wanted to continue the really good things that Italy did. One of the good things that Italy did was the online scoreboard. That really was tremendous and quite groundbreaking, I think. So we worked with the World Radio League to see what we could do on top of that. And really, for us, it was about providing as many statistics as possible so that the world could oversee WRTC from wherever they are and get involved. So, and with that, sort of working alongside the World Radio League scoreboard, we had this media thing going on round the clock during the contest for the whole 24 hours. And I'm hoping that the world felt that they were able to sort of really get engaged with what was happening on site in the UK. And there were a number of things that were being looked at on the media, on the live stream. Some of it had to be very carefully broadcasted, and with things like not showing the call signs that the teams were using, because obviously that's confidential and we didn't want to encourage anything like cheerleading during the contest. But there was also lots of opportunity to have interviews, with various people that were there, and seeing some of the on-site activity on the lead up to the contest and during the contest. So there's a whole raft of material there, which, to be honest, the statistics side of it, I haven't really delved into yet because things have just been so busy, but there's a whole load of information there and doing sort of analysis of the logs. In terms of the actual event itself, I don't think we did anything, hugely different to what was done before in terms of the Italian effort. As I say, they set an exceptionally good, high bar for us to strive for. And we were even happy to have a number of the Italian organising committee representatives actually at the event in the UK as well. So it was great to hear from them.
So one of the things you did really well, Mark, at every turn you were thanking the volunteers, and I know you had hundreds of volunteers. And I'm sort of curious how you were able to get all those people together. The other thing that struck me while we were hobnobbing with other contesters at the Y Boston, I realized that there were a lot of people out in the field setting up stations. So a lot of your volunteers weren't enjoying some of the things that we all got to enjoy back at the Y Boston. They were out working. I remember Andy, G4 PIQ, showed up clearly just leaving the field just for 5 minutes at the podium. But tell me about that. Tell me about the volunteer effort, what it was like to get those people together. I've got to say, they all seem very enthused. They're a great group of people. Everybody I talked to that was a volunteer were very helpful and hardworking. But tell me more about that.
Well, I suppose now the event's over, I can probably just be a bit more open and honest about that. Because when you're building up to an event and you're trying to instill confidence in everybody that you got this, and we were confident, but I can sort of tell you a little bit more about how I was really feeling on the lead up. The reality of it was, right, is that we didn't really have enough volunteers, if I'm honest, right? We could have done with another 50 volunteers. However, the volunteers that we did have, we always knew were going to do everything that they needed to do to make the event happen. So that there was definite confidence there. When you're trying to build 50 stations, or 55 in fact, because we had our spare sites, we knew that we had to start early because we didn't really have enough people to get it done in a couple of days. So we started on the Saturday because we had to get through them all. So they're very capable people, and that was headed up by Chris G4FZN, who was kind of reporting into Andy G4PIQ, as you mentioned. When PIQ turned up at the closing ceremony, or sorry, at the opening ceremony, he was still in his shorts. He was sweating. He'd literally just come out the field addressing a whole load of issues. So it was that gave a bit of flavour to what was going on behind the scenes out there. So yeah, I mean, we didn't really have hundreds of volunteers. We had, I would say, a team of about 50 people out in the field that were building the sites at the sort of peak. And on some of the days, we only really had sort of 36, 37, 38 people, and it peaked at 50. So, but that just goes to show again, they had to work extra hard. So they were really good people getting the work done in those extreme temperatures.
So 50 people doing the work of hundreds.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it came down to. We knew that from the very beginning of this, if you sort of, those that have been following these interviews, cast your mind back to right at the beginning, we went out to the UK ham community just to try and get a feel for how many volunteers we could get involved. And we got an initial response. It was about 100. And you always know that you're never really going to get 100. Because as it gets closer, things come up, people are not available, and we understand that. So we always knew it was going to be a bit of a push. But the people that came forward, they were absolutely superb. They did the jobs of 2 or 3 people in themselves, and that's what made this happen. It was their dedicated hard work.
So let's move on to the competitors, because that's what obviously this is all about. I was blown away. I certainly saw the roster of names that were going to be there, but it's very different when you're actually in the room and these operators start showing up. Call signs that I've known for years, many that I've interviewed. But I think one of the things that I was struck with was just how happy everybody was. I mean, a lot of hugs and laughter and backslapping, and that really continued through the week. Tell me a little bit about that from your perspective, because you've obviously been in this contesting group for a long time. Tell me about it.
I agree. It was great. When I started seeing people pour through the door, that was a real sort of milestone. And yeah, really big names, as you say. Great. And some people that I've only really heard on the air, or I see them in the results table. And I think one of the things that struck me with 2026 was, I mean, it really was a lineup of top contesters, really big names. And that for me, I knew it was going to be a great contest because, it was just tremendous to see those big names coming here. And it added to the pressure because we knew that we couldn't mess up. We had to really pull it off. And we just wanted to give everyone a good time. So there was a lot going on behind the scenes. I wish there was more time for me and the rest of the organizers to socialize with these great people. There was very little time for that because there was so many things going on behind the scenes, and things that we were expecting, I suppose, some things we weren't expecting, and we just had to react to it and deal with it. So, yeah, hope everyone enjoyed it, and yeah, but I think the key message is it added to the pressure actually when you saw the people that were coming.
Well, as I said, I've had the advantage of being able to interview many of these people, and off camera, they're very competitive. You know, there are comments that are made that you just know there's this competitive edge, and then I'd walk by a table, and those two or three people that I know have been making competitive comments back and forth, you know, behind the scenes. They're sharing a beer together, and I just really enjoyed that. And you know, by the end of the week, and I think this just continued all week long. You know, including after the competition at the closing ceremonies, where people were just happy for each other. I didn't see anybody upset or angry, or I'm sure they were disappointed if they didn't win, but you didn't see that at all. People were just happy with the results. The other thing I want to mention, I was sitting in the referees meeting and also looking around the room, also an amazing group of operators.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about this hobby, isn't it? That everyone's friendly with each other. They're all friends, and but I can tell you, when they're in that contest, in that tent with those headphones on, and that clock starts, they're, they're I don't know whether friend is the right word, but they're competing and they're serious. They want to beat. They want to be the best. So they become aggressive at that time, and you have to be aggressive to be a top contester. There's no doubt about it. And you're right. The referees. I mean, there are a number of referees that had been referees previously, had been competitors previously, and some of them hadn't. They were fresh, and we wanted to give that spread so that we were not only inviting back the experienced guys, but also to give the new guys an opportunity to be involved and be a referee. So that was refreshing. And what about the youth, Kevin? We had some excellent youth teams, and the result of those youth teams is just tremendous. I mean, to end where that top youth team. I mean, you probably saw the video.
I did see that. That was fantastic.
It's doing the rounds, and it just that for me watching that, it was just a great moment of how much it meant to them. That's what it's all about, and that puts something into the future of ham radio contesting, and that's one of the key things that we wanted to do.
So, Mark, because these are all competitors and everybody wants to win, I think I was prepped to hear more. Maybe not disgruntlement, but at least concerns. And I really didn't hear that much that came back. But you're the chairman of the organization, so you would have been the person that heard. What sort of things did you hear coming back from the field?
I mean, I'm pleased to say that generally the comments are positive. The competitors were really pleased with the sites. That was obviously a big thing. We talk an awful lot about offering a level playing field. And so that was, high on the priority list. We wanted to do that. That feedback sounded quite positive. I mentioned that there were lots of things that we had to deal with behind the scenes. It was very busy, and all from the start. When you've got all these people, you've got 150 people coming into all the airports that you have to get to Boston, and you can imagine the logistics in that. There were, delayed flights. There were people that couldn't find the transfer, or all these kind of things. So that was all going on. But during the contest, we had some technical issues to deal with, but nothing really major. There was one. We had connectivity issues with coming back, and that was nothing to do with WRL. That was about the configuration of a couple of computers out in the field. On the logging programs that emerged on the morning of the contest. And you can imagine, when we're trying to ask the referee to speak to those operators, say, right, this is how you need to fix it. And the operators are running a pile up at like 200 an hour, and they're like, no. So you can understand, and they want to crack on. There was one antenna issue with an 80-meter dipole that completely lost connection. It was after sunrise on the Sunday morning, so the desire from the guys at that site to get the antenna working. It was a problem up at height, actually, up the tower. So we would have to have taken down the tower and fixed the issue. But after sunrise on 80 meters, they weren't interested in fixing that. It wasn't really an issue. There was a generator issue where there was some kind of airlock in the fuel pumping into the generator. But we just deployed a new generator and that got resolved very quickly. So that wasn't really a problem. Yeah, aside from that, there weren't really too many issues. We had questions coming back from the referees asking us about how what button they press to hang up on the phone. Yeah, stuff like that, because I guess these Nokia phones are quite ancient now. People aren't used to using them, so there was some of that. And there was the automatic spot generation, which caused a bit of an issue on sideband. That went down for a while, and that was to do with what James tells me is that was to do with there being we were overloading the cluster basically with the number of spots that we could put out. So I guess the lessons learned from that is that we for next time we need to, if that same system is used, we need to really trial that to its maximum, its capacity. But that got resolved and the spots were going through. We were doing manual spots to fill in on that when we could. So the contingency process worked in that regard. Aside from that, lots of little logistical bits and pieces, but I didn't really pick up on anything so far that I've heard that was a real major problem.
Well, the interesting thing about that list, other than the 80-meter antenna, there's nothing there that prevents somebody from operating and competing. And that was what Jeff N5TJ was telling me during the contest. Like, we were talking about the spotting and some of the connectivity issues. And he was reminding me, these guys have what they need to compete. They just want to stay focused on competing, and none of these things are going to get in the way of them competing. So I think that you've confirmed that for sure. Mark, I know that you know all of these people. They're your friends. And I know as chairman, you probably have to be somewhat neutral. But what kind of stories were you hearing? What were you hearing back about the operators? Were there surprises on the leaderboard that you weren't expecting? Tell me, not Mark M0DXR, the chairman, Mark, the competitor. What were you feeling when you were seeing those names maybe down in the 20th spot and then they jumped up to 6? What was going through your head?
Yeah. Well, there was obviously some very big names that were floating around the top of the leaderboard from the very get-go. And obviously, Yuri and Yarrick, we were expecting to do very well, and of course they did. They were always very close to the top. I was watching very closely over Dan and Chris because I suppose in the back of my mind I was thinking they were going to do really well. And they started off in I think they was kind of in the 20s, down there.
They were 23rd.
Yeah, and so I was thinking, they're going to come back. Once they get into their rhythm, because at the beginning of the contest, you can't really get a true feel for what's going to happen because you get lucky with a few multipliers that end up calling you, or you find them, and it just puts you right up at the top. It is only really after a good few hours where you can they settle into it and you can start to get a feel. It was clear that the teams that hit 40 meters on the Saturday afternoon at some point, they were sort of benefiting from some very high angle propagation. There's a whole load of G stations and PAs and DLs and stuff like that, French stations that you can work during the day on 40. I noticed that Dan and Chris didn't go to 40 until much later. So I knew that, I was thinking, are they going to miss out on all those Gs, all that short skip stuff on 40? But I also knew that when they did go to 40, they were going to have a whole load of multipliers suddenly hit their score. So they were going to come right up. So I was waiting for them to improve on their ranking, which did happen. I think they ended up coming up to 5th and 6th, something around there. So that was really interesting to watch. but you just couldn't really call it. It was so hard to know, and there were so many different variables. 10 meters was, I mean, 10 meters really seemed to play ball. That sporadic on 10 was exceptionally good. And when I went out to site on the Saturday evening, some of those signals on 10 meters were tremendous. So I'm sure the teams would have enjoyed experiencing that, because it's always a little bit, 50-50. You never really know if it's going to happen, the sporadic E. So that was really good. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I would look at the scoreboard every so often just to see what was going on, but didn't really have too much time to deeply engage in it. So, just let it flow and see. But yeah, it was very interesting.
Well, it certainly was a lot of fun. And there was, as you know, there was a group of people standing in front of the leaderboard at all times. And I'm sure there are people in the rooms or in the bar also watching the leaderboard.
Randy K5ZD, he was well up there as well, and they were just, even after sort of 4, 5, 6 hours, they were so close, the scores, and that's actually one thing that really stands out for me in this WRTC, how close those scores were at the end. It could have really, I mean, the adjudication could have changed everything. Just the sake of, 1 or 2 multipliers between second and third. I mean, it really was like that.
I know one of the things we were talking about in the lead up to the WRTC was getting more people to participate in the contest, because obviously you need people in the IARU HF Championship in order to make 6,000 queues. And it seems as though that happened. There seemed as though there was a lot of participation, but I haven't seen the numbers. How many people were on the air for the contest?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and something, as I say, we haven't really got into all the analysis of yet. I have seen some numbers floating around, but nothing that I can quote. But we really tried to promote very heavily here in the UK and on some of the more sort of global reflectors and social media accounts and groups, but to get on the air and watch out for these special call signs, we had the Chaser WRTC 26 Chaser program, which allowed you to download a certificate for how many stations you managed to contact in WRTC, but also how quickly you were able to contact those stations. So there was a sort of a clock count on that as well. And looking at some of the posts on the social media side of it with these certificates that have been downloaded, I know there's a large number of certificates that have been downloaded. I think it's 700 or 800, something like that, which is really encouraging. So I got, and when you look at the QSO numbers, I to be honest with you, I couldn't believe how many QSOs these guys were making. After 24 hours, it was some ridiculous number, like 3.5, pushing 4,000 QSOs. I mean, that's just bonkers. And we were saying that 6,000 QSOs, maybe 6,500 QSOs would be possible, which we'd never seen before. So it was clear that the message about WRTC was getting out there, and I think each event that passes, it becomes more widely known. For the next one in 2030, I hope that those numbers go up even further, and more unique calls get in the logs.
Mark, is there any one story that we haven't heard about that our viewers should hear?
I suppose, looking back on it, we can smile now. We had a few really interesting. My brother actually drove out to collect one of the teams on the Friday. It was RW7K and KU1CW. So he drove out there to pick them up, and I actually went out on the Friday to help with some of the fuel runs. So I was going to petrol stations, filling up fuel cans on the Friday, so that the teams had enough fuel over the weekend. And I went out there with Philip DK6SP. And my brother, while I was doing that, he drove that team back to Boston. There were road diversions, there were road closures. It was causing a bit of a problem for the toing and froing from the HQ to the sites. So he was going around in circles, and his sat nav was telling him, it wasn't telling him how to get back to Boston. So he ended up going back out east again towards the sites. It was getting really late. It was 11:30, 12 o'clock at this point. So they were they needed sleep before the contest. So anyway, I'm on the phone to my brother, and he's I'm trying to direct him back to Why Boston, and he says, "Oh, hang on, we've hit something." And you think, "Oh no, what?" Anyway, so he says, "I don't know what's happened." So he gets out, looks at his car, and the front wheel on his car had completely buckled over, so it was like horizontal on the road. So I say to him, "Right, I'm coming out." So I turn around. I'm nearly back at Why Boston at this point. I turn around, drove all the way back out to him, and the car's just in the middle of the road. So he has to wait for the police to come out to tow his car off the road so that it could be just abandoned for the night. By the time that all got sorted, the police came out, did all of that, and they all jumped in my car. I drove him back to Why Boston. We got back about 1:30 a.m., something like that. I suppose, the reason that I can smile about that story now is, well, first of all, the team got on and made a bunch of QSOs and everything was fine, but also that they survived it, because what had happened is there was rust that built up on the by the wheel, so that could have given away at any point, and they could have been involved in a very serious accident, all three of them. So the fact that we made it back to Why Boston safely and everyone could continue on with their weekend was a really positive story. Now, I suppose that's one that stands out for me.
Who was the team we're talking about?
Yeah, it was RW7K and KU1CW.
Well, good fortune that they're okay. That's I never heard that story. I thought I had my ear to the ground with everything, and did not hear that.
That's one of many. Maybe on the next chat we have, I'll remember some others.
So, Mark, now we're moving on to 2030, and there's been some discussion about where WRTC is going to be held in 2030. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I know that there are discussions happening. There's nothing that the sanctioning committee wants to release at this stage, but there are some very positive discussions taking place, and I suspect in the next month or month or two, maybe even less than that, hopefully there'll be some communication to announce where that's heading to. And that team will need to be thinking about which qualifying contests are going to be the first ones, because could potentially be the CQ Worldwides later this year. So they've got a bit of work to do to form the committee, assign roles to those committee members, and then get some progress on the qualification criteria. So yeah, really excited to see what happens with that.
So are there more than one bid being considered, or just one?
I actually don't know. I'm aware of one. I'm aware of a potential second one that was being discussed at one stage, but I've literally just been added to the sanctioning committee email reflector, so a little bit of catching up to do there.
So since you're still smiling and you're super happy, what kind of advice would you give the new WRTC 2030 organizing committee?
Well, Lee G0MTN, who was on our organising committee as vice chairman and also headed up the rules and selection process, I found out a few months ago that he had been writing and keeping up to date a document all the way through for the past few years on kind of notes that the next host would need to allow them to execute. And also there's a lot of lessons learned in that document as well. So I think it's about 85 pages. So they'll have something there to hopefully use to get them started. I think it's really going to be, if I sort of think back, it's quite overwhelming when you think about everything that needs to be happened. But I think it has to be broken down into kind of, you have to have sort of gates that you go through. So don't worry too much about the whole thing at the moment. Just set some targets, maybe quarterly targets to get through. Yeah, of course, you need all that stuff in the back of your mind. But really, if you try and tackle everything, you'll get completely overwhelmed and you won't go any further. So I think it's about things come together eventually. And if you've got the right team, it needs to be a committed team that is completely all in, because without that, it's just not going to happen. Once you've got that committed team and they've all got their assigned roles, set some near-term milestones and targets, and just keep reviewing that as you go along. That's the advice I would give.
Any final thoughts for the viewers?
Well, obviously, we've said thank you, and I can't say thank you enough, so I might as well just say that again. Appreciate all of the volunteers and all of the people that got involved, all of the competitors, the referees, the judges. It really all came together, and we're so pleased about that. And thank you to all the chasers, the people that got on the air and worked all the stations. And a big thank you to all the sponsors, because this is a hobby, and we rely on the sponsorship from commercial organisations, clubs, and individuals. All of the help that everyone provided in that regard, so that we could enjoy WRTC. I hope that the experience of 2026 doesn't end in July, but it continues on.
One of the things that I was struck with, Mark, before we close, it was such a unique experience. I mean, I really had a great time meeting people and having conversations. I still was photographing and videoing, so I had to get some work done also. But I came home realizing I don't know when this next opportunity is going to happen. I think it's going to be in 4 years. I'll go to Dayton. I'll see some of these people. I could go to Friedrichshafen and maybe see another group. But to see this group again, it's 4 years. It makes me really want to go back and redo it and spend more time hanging out in the lobby and less time editing. So just a phenomenal opportunity. I would recommend to anybody in 4 years, try to go as a spectator, go as a volunteer, help out, because it's just a great group of people to be around. Mark, I really appreciate your effort, first of all, in the WRTC 2026. It's just clear that you're a phenomenal leader, a great organizer, and thank you for taking time to do this interview with me today.
Thanks, Kevin. And I have to say, all the coverage that Q5 had put into WRTC really helped, because you had competitors being interviewed, you had the the contest crew being interviewed on a regular basis, and that just really set a lovely. It was a lovely story leading into WRTC, and no doubt you're going to have some follow-up discussions with those guys as well, and that's great. I think so many things have developed since Italy, and it's now there's a great foundation for the 2030 event. So there's even though it's 4 years away, things are going to start kicking off very, very soon. So we can't go to sleep for too long. The excitement's going to kick in for the next one very soon.
My name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. This has been Q5 Ham Radio. Thanks for joining us. 73.